Hello friends, and welcome back to another video. Today I am here to share with you my March wrap up. Before we get into any of those details, I wanted to quickly show you this. I didn't include it in my haul because the haul's going to go up anyway, but I just wanted to add it here whilst I'm here. I recently picked up this book called The School for Good Mothers by Jessamine Chan. And I think I heard Book of Sins talk about it recently. It's a newer release, and yeah, I just kind of cover bought it and also had in the back of my mind that I'd heard some praise for it. And it says, Frida Lou has had a bad day. She remembers taking Harriet from her cot at 4 AM and changed her nappy. She remembers giving her a morning bottle. She also remembers desperately needing to finish an article for work, but she'd left the file for it on her desk in the office. She would just go and get it quickly. She'd be back in an hour. Harriet would be fine. She was so sure it would be okay. And it obviously kind of takes a decline. I think it's supposed to be like a domestic thriller. And yeah, I've been into those a lot lately, as you will see from this month's reading. But I thought I'd show that here instead of including it separately in another little clip in the whole video. Anyway, I want to say that March was, like, in terms of quantity, not necessarily quality, but quantity wise, it was a really successful month. I read like 20 books. I'll overlay my little statistic information for you guys if you're interested. But yeah, I'm really happy with what I got through. I read a load of audiobooks, I read a load of physical books, and read every day, I believe, every day in March, across a variety. There was lots of mysteries and thrillers, there was lots of NetGalley arcs, and yeah, generally across the board it was a great month, a very kind of genre bending month from what I usually read anyway. So let's get started. The first book I read was a buddy read with Kat from Kat's Reading Corner on Instagram, and this was the final book in the A Tale of Magic series. For now at least, I don't know if it's completely wrapped up, but for now it is just a 3-book series, a trilogy. And this is by Chris Colfer. This is a spin-off series to the Orlando Stories books, set in the same world, with some familiar characters, with some new characters, and we're just following the story of Bristol Evergreen and how she becomes involved in the main story arc. So this was a lot of fun. I gave this one 4 stars. In terms of genre, I class it as YA fantasy, and it's published by Little Brown Books in 2021, so definitely a newer release. I definitely enjoyed seeing the Fairy Council work independently from the Fairy Godmother in this one. I felt like it strengthened their character arcs separately, and just made that bond stronger when they were together, so that was really cool to see. It was incredibly immersive. Like, I really powered through this one, and there was lots of exciting variety to all the plots that was included in this. But I had this like pet peeve that I really noticed in this one. Why does Colfer describe a character as if for the first time that you're meeting them every time? Like, okay, maybe not every time, but enough for me to notice and be like, dude, I'm establishing this world, I know who this is. Maybe a couple of times in the first book, yeah, I'd get it, but this is a 3rd book in a spin-off series, so you'd presume most people would have read the books before this and the main series. Why do you need to keep talking to me as if I don't know who they are? So it was a little bit annoying, but other than that, I really enjoyed this one. A 4 out of 5 stars. Next up, I dived back into some horror manga, and I picked up Shiva by Junji Ito, and this is 9 selected short stories of his. It's adult horror published by Viz Media in 2017, and yeah, this one was super unsettling. Let me just read you the synopsis so you can get a kind of general overview of what stories are included in this. So, including 9 of Junji Ito's best short stories, as selected by the author himself and presented with accompanying notes and commentary. An arm peppered with tiny holes dangles from a sick girl's window. After an idol hangs herself, balloons bearing the faces of their destined victims appear in the sky. An amateur film crew hires an extremely individualistic fashion model and faces a real bloody ending. An offering of 9 fresh nightmares of the delectation. Why can't I say that? Delectation of horror fans. So we've got a bit of everything, yeah, across a variety of horror-y kind of genres, I guess you would say, in here. yeah, this was super unsettling. It definitely did its job in that regard. Really got into my head. I was just feeling like, you know, sometimes when something really scares you, it makes your skin like prickle and itchy, and just you almost have a physical reaction to a psychological event. That's how I was feeling through this. It just definitely did what it came to do, and then some. I will say the holes theme in one of the short stories was just a bit too much for me. I didn't think that was going to be an issue, but clearly Junji Ito's too good at what he does, and yeah, it was too much for my sensitive soul. It made me feel really sick. Like, even just thinking about it now, I feel like kind of like I want to vomit, to be honest. But yeah, excellent collection if you want to be frightened and made to feel very uncomfortable. I believe this is my 4th Junji Ito now. I have also got another video separate to this where I talk about the first 3 that I had read together in a joint review. Up next we have the beginning of a very addictive moment in my time during March. I really got on the audiobook bandwagon, and I found that it was nice to listen to a lot of thrillers and mysteries, and also specifically audiobook versions of my NetGalley arcs. So I had it on in the background a lot of the time, and I don't know, I just really found it beneficial to me because I was getting through some of the books that maybe I wasn't as interested in anymore, but wanted to still get my thoughts and opinions out there, or books that I'm just not generally drawn to, because with NetGalley I take a bit more of a risk and I get a lot of mysteries and thrillers and things that I wouldn't typically buy on the usual. So yeah, I thought it was quite a good resource to use to listen to the genres that I don't really participate in much, and I think it worked for the most part in terms of me getting through a load of them. But all that to say, the first audiobook I read was not a thriller and I don't even think it was one of my NetGalley arcs, but I read Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine, which I gave a 2.5 stars, unfortunately. So the book itself is written by Gal Honeyman, and it was read by Tracy Wiles. It's contemporary fiction, adult. I listened to it specifically on BBC Sounds. I downloaded the app this time around, and they had quite a lot of different choices on there, which is nice, and this one was released in 2017. So we are following Eleanor, who is very particular. I think there's a lot of discussion that says that she's on the spectrum of some kind. I don't know what she has, if anything, what's like, not diagnosed because she's not a real character, like a real person, but what inspiration is taken. I don't know if it's an own voices, I'm not too sure, but she's definitely got her very strict routine. She's very particular with how she likes her life, and we're just following her as a lot of situations happen that don't fit into her neatly organised structure that she enjoys. So, and it's kind of how she copes with that, and almost how she kind of learns to adapt as well. The narration I felt was great in being very distinctive for each character. I felt like everyone was very much their own. I could tell them apart, which was helpful especially when you've not got your eyes on a page and you know it's going on in your head, and you kind of need to know, okay, that's person, that's that person, because you're not taking it in physically, if you know what I mean. And it gave me like these Jacqueline Wilson vibes, but for adults, which was quite cool. However, I really had no connection with the story itself, unfortunately, and because of that, I guess I lacked any sort of immersive feeling. There's nothing wrong with the story at all, it's just something I didn't connect with, and so I couldn't enjoy it to its fullest potential, unfortunately. After that, I finished another buddy read. I read this one with my cousin Ebony, and together we read The Silence of the Girls by Pat Barker, which I gave a 3 out of 5 stars. This is adult Greek myth retelling, published by Penguin in 2018, and in this it's kind of marketed as being giving a voice to the women of Troy that is otherwise kind of ignored throughout history. So we're following the events of the Trojan War with Achilles and I can't remember the other guy's name, Hector I think, as you know, everything's gone crazy because of Helen and the situation. They want her back, they want her, blah 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 blah, and we're following that period of time, but through the eyes of Briseis, who is also a queen that has been captured and has turned slave. So yeah, the Greeks have taken her, and we're kind of seeing life through her eyes. So we're not directly in the battle of war, we're not seeing all the intense, you know, big players, so to speak, but we're seeing it through her eyes, and we're kind of giving a voice to her that we otherwise wouldn't have had. And that's kind of what I was really hoping and expecting for this. I will say that it educated me on that era in history. You guys know that I love Greek mythology. However, the actual historical context I'm not too savvy on. So it was interesting to kind of see that perspective and kind of see how the actual history related a little bit in terms of the myths of that time and how things connected in that way. And I definitely did like it, and in saying that, which is kind of a contradictive to what I just said, I enjoyed that it was kind of less focused on the myth side of things. The characters themselves didn't seem to be so focused on the gods. They didn't, well, from the perspective that we've read from this interpretation, they didn't seem to think that everything was pivoted on the god's will. They didn't think that everything was because of them, you know. It felt more a bit like myth and legend, a bit more like, okay, we've got our own future and lives in our hands. They weren't putting everything in a higher power, which was interesting to see, because as I say, I'm more familiar with the myths themselves, and obviously reading from that perspective, the gods are everywhere, you know. They're kind of like playing the world as a chessboard, you know. So yeah, it was a cool, different interpretation to what I'm used to personally. However, I really lacked character connection in this one as well. There were some nauseating descriptions just I felt like was just unneeded. And the big thing I felt, and I think my cousin felt this as well, is it's published, this is why I emphasised it at the beginning, it's marketed as being given a voice to the women, the silent girls of this period, and during these times. And really we're still getting Achilles' story. Like, we even have perspectives of Achilles and of what's the other dude, Patroclus, I want to say. We have perspectives of them, like we're still being told their story, and even when we don't have their POVs, Briseis is talking about him. She's still telling us his story, and I'm like, no, I want to know more about you. I want to know, like, put them to the side a minute. They've got all these legends, all these songs and retellings about them. I actually want to know about the women. So I was kind of feeling like I was missold on this to some extent. Like, I enjoyed it. It was a good read. I'll definitely be reading the next book. I think we both plan to read The Women of Troy this month in April. But I was a bit, I don't know, shortchanged, you know. I don't know if anyone else has felt that. I haven't looked too deep into other people's reviews, but I know when it first came out it had quite a lot of praise. I mean, it was shortlisted for the Costa Novel Awards 2018, so it's definitely had some praise. But did anybody else feel that way with this one? And if you've read The Women of Troy, can you let me know if that's still in the same vein? Because obviously I've not yet read it. Well, not obviously, I'm saying now, I've not yet read The Women of Troy. So if so, I can be a bit more prepared of what to expect and maybe manage my expectations a bit. I don't know. But yeah, those are my thoughts. Next up, back to the audiobooks. I listened to Careless by Kirsty Capes, which was read by Abby Andrews. It's YA contemporary. Again, I listened to it free through BBC Sounds, and this one was published in 2021. This was one of the NetGalley arcs that I had, so I counted it as audiobook and NetGalley. So yeah, this one I gave a 3.5 stars to. I really enjoyed this one. We're following a young girl who is in the care system. She finds herself pregnant, and she's basically, well, the title says it all, she feels careless, like no one, she's both careless with like her situation in some respects, because she's very young, she's not prepared, she didn't mean for this to happen, it just happened. You see in the relationship that she had, it was very her kind of wanting to please the other person, and then realising she maybe shouldn't have given herself that much to him. So yeah, she felt like she was careless in the situation. She feels like she's in a careless environment, nobody actually loves her, and it's her navigating that. And again, this kind of gave me Jacqueline Wilson vibes, and I really enjoyed it. Yeah, I think it was very immersive storytelling. I really cared for this girl and kind of the decisions that she made, and also kind of seeing her growth as a character get stronger as the story went on, and kind of value her own worth, you know. I thought that was really beautiful. I think it was done really well, and I very much enjoyed that. Excellent topics were discussed as well, and yeah, I definitely recommend this one, especially if you want a gateway for older readers, like maybe 14, 15 onwards, maybe even 13. I think it's got some swearing in it though. As a gateway from Jacqueline Wilson to something older but on a similar kind of level, I'd recommend that. Next up, I've been trying to be good to myself and not spending time on things that do not serve me purpose or joy. And so I've been DNFing more. I've got 2 DNFs to talk about this month, and the first one is The Paper Palace, which I'm gutted about. I was really looking forward to this one. This is actually another one that I had approved through NetGalley, but I listened to the audiobook of this. The book itself is written by Miranda Howdee-haie. The audiobook was read by Laurel Leafco. It's adult literary, contemporary, published by Penguin in 2021, and I DNF'd it on chapter 10. I think that was about 25% on the way in, so obviously I've not rated it or anything like that. I've just left it blank, but here are the reasons. So first of all, I was really hyped because I'd seen Mercedes, she's sitting on my fairy loot box over here, from Mercy's Bookish Musings, really rate this one. And I was like, oh yeah, I really like her kind of more literary books that she recommends. That's like kind of been my stepladder into that genre, and I've enjoyed things that she's recommended before. But yeah, it just wasn't for me. We're following a woman who, like, you're thrown straight into her having an affair with her best friend, and it seems like it's kind of a thing that's been, you know, tiptoeing in the works for the duration of their friendship. They're middle-aged now. They're at like a gathering with their family, her kids, his wife, her mum, I think. Like, they're at like a little gathering, and the whole family's in the room next door, and they're up against the wall, like outside, having a quickie, and you can tell that there's been tension and this has been like wanted for so long. And then from that moment, it's like the 24 hours period after that moment, and you go back in, not back in time as in like time travel, but you go back and see her girlhood, like as she was growing up, her relationship with her best friend, and how it could have been more and then it didn't, and then her meeting her husband and all these sort of things. And I guess it's building up to the decision of if she's gonna come clean and tell her husband, or completely stop this affair, if it's just gonna be a one thing and done, or if she's gonna carry on this affair in secret, or if she's gonna tell the husband and then go off with the best friend and be together. But I couldn't get into it. It wasn't for me. I didn't feel interested at all. Everyone was unlikable, and I enjoy reading unlikable characters at times. If there's a plot that I really enjoy and I'm intrigued to continue with, then I will deal with the unlikable characters, and I'll appreciate, like, oh wow, this is really adding to the story, it's building everything nicely, I can appreciate that. But because I didn't have that in the terms of the story, the plot, the unlikable characters were just glaringly obvious to me. I just couldn't get through it. And yeah, confusing and annoying narrator. I just didn't enjoy it, unfortunately. So this was not one for me, sadly. But that's not to say that it's not going to be one for you. So if you like the sound of it, which I like the sound of it, carry on. But yeah, in execution, it just was not it for me. Okay, another buddy read, that is The Demon World by Sally Green, which is the second book in the Smoke Thieves trilogy, and I was reading this with Deborah from Hills of Books. She is leaving it at 2 books because the second one just didn't wow her. The first one had potential, both of us felt that way, but this second one didn't pull her in enough for her to want to finish the trilogy, which is fair enough. So this month I'm going to be barreling on my own. I don't know actually, because we were doing every other month this and another book series, so this month it's the other series that we're jumping to, but I'm not sure if I'm just gonna polish off the 3rd book of this one as well, or if I'll save it for the month that we were going to be buddy reading it. I'll figure it out, I'm not too sure yet. Anyway, yes, so I have spoken a little bit about this world and everything last month, so I won't go too much into detail. I'll just tell you like my non-spoilery thoughts. But in terms of actual details, oh, by the way, I realised I finished another book before this one. A couple of times I've done this where I've gotten a bit too excited and I've written it down in my book and I'm like, oh, I finished something else before that one. So the book that I'm going to talk about after this one, I actually finished it before this one. If you care about order, I care about order, so that kind of bugs me. But anyway, YA Fantasy, Penguin, 2019. So for this one, I felt like it had really great exploration of the actual demon world, and that's something that from the very first book I was motivated by. Like, that's what I was really interested in delving into and getting more than just a glimpse. Like, I wanted to actually see the mechanism, the workings of it all, and we definitely got that in this sequel. I really enjoyed the political intrigue in this one. That one kept me quite hooked in, I would say. I can't remember if I said I gave this a 3.5 stars. However, there was so much swooning in this by multiple characters that it just bothered me, because it was unnecessary swooning. Like, I love a good swoon here and there. I swoon a lot from time to time. But the amount, and it was just unnecessary. It just bothered me. So there's that. And still, I would say it's underwhelming for what I'd expect from this author and this kind of storytelling, which is unfortunate. I myself will be continuing and polishing off the third book in this trilogy, but I just hope it like blows it out of the park. I really do. Otherwise, it's just been a mediocre trilogy so far. So the book that I actually finished before that is another audiobook, and it's another one that I had through NetGalley as well. And that was The Wife Upstairs by Rachel Hawkins, and this was read by multiple people: Lauren Fortgang, Emily Schafer, and Kirby Hayborn. It's adult thriller published by HarperCollins back in 2021, so not too long ago at all. And this one I gave a 3 out of 5 stars. Just gonna load up the synopsis on Goodreads and give you a little bit of a more coherent synopsis, so that I don't accidentally spoil anything. Let's have a little gander here then, shall we? Okay, meet Jane, newly arrived in Birmingham, Alabama. Why did I say it like that? Alabama. Jane is a broke dog walker in Thornfield Estates, a gated community full of McMansions, shiny SUVs, and bored housewives. The kind of place where no one will notice if Jane lifts the discarded, I can't say this, and jewellery off the side tables of her well-heeled clients, where no one will think to ask if Jane is her real name. But her luck changes when she meets Eddie Rochester. Recently widowed, Eddie is Thornfield's estate's most mysterious resident. His wife Bee drowned in a boating accident with her best friend, their bodies lost to the deep. Jane can't help but see an opportunity. Can you see this? Okay. Jane can't help but see an opportunity in Eddie. Not only is he rich, brooding and handsome, he could also offer her the kind of protection she's always yearned for. As Jane and Eddie fall for each other, Jane is increasingly haunted by the legend of Bee, an ambitious beauty with a rags-to-riches origin story, who launched a wildly successful southern lifestyle brand. How can she, plain Jane, ever measure up? And can she win Eddie's heart before her past or his catches up to her? So it was a very twisty-turny, intriguing plot all the way through. I absolutely loved that. It was so pacey, like I wanted to know what was happening next. Good inspiration of a classic gothic. I actually did a reading vlog, so some of these I believe I spoke about in the vlog, but obviously more detail will be in that, so please still check that out. For a while I could easily have DNF'd it. I was kind of on the cusp, but I'm glad I pushed through because it was quite fun. Some voices that were done were a little bit grating, they just weren't to my taste, and the ending I was not a fan of at all. Like, just scrap that ending and then it would have been great. Continuing on with my little thriller-esque audiobook situation, I listened to Last Girl Ghosted, again another NetGalley arc as well. This was by Lisa Ungar, read by Vivian Lahini. Adult thriller published by HQ Digital, and it was released in 2021. And I'm going to do the same for this thriller because, again, I don't want to spoil anything. I will read you the synopsis. Secrets, obsessions and vengeance converge in this riveting thriller about an online dating match turned deadly cat and mouse game. That's what I'm going to give you from that. That sounds like it sells it enough, I feel. So this one was another pacey one. I gave it a 3 stars. Easy listening for the most part, I would say. I really like the concept of internet dating, especially because around that time I just watched The Tinder Swindler and I was into that sort of like online dating, not who they say they are kind of thing, and this was giving me that vibe. Interesting character backstory as well. However, I do feel like they made the plot to be too over complex. They smushed too many like relevant topics in there to kind of feel current and like hip, I guess you'd say, which I actually felt to be confusing, and then added like a dated tone to it. and I didn't enjoy the ending. So another one that just, the ending just fell flat for me. After that, you guessed it, another NetGalley book that I listened to through audio. This one, all the other ones that weren't BBC Sounds I listened to through the app called BorrowBox, which you just need your library card to use. I don't know which regions it caters to, but it's basically Libby, I think, but my area's version of that. Anyway, yes, so I listened to Carefree Black Girl, read by Ziba Blay, which is the author, and also with like a sort of talk at the beginning with Clara Ampho. This is non-fiction, social science, adult, published by Vintage Digital in 2022, so a very fresh from the press release. And this is a couple of essays from the author talking about what it is to be a carefree black girl, and I absolutely loved the podcast at the start. That was the conversation with Clara Ampho. It really kind of helped to set the tone of what the essays were going to be about and the topics that were going to be discussed, which I liked. It kind of was a gentle kind of ease you in, like, so this is the intro sort of thing. Pop culture elements kind of made it relevant, but in a good way. When compared to the thriller, you know, that was my issue with the thriller. This one, it worked, and it just emphasised how prevalent some of these topics still are today, despite our like modern age. And yeah, I just loved listening to the author herself reading these essays. It was great. So that was a 5 out of 5 star. Back to physical books for now. The next book I picked up was I Feel Bad All Day, Every Day About Everything by Orly Auslander, and I gave this one a 4 out of 5 stars. This is adult non-fiction, published by Blue Rider Press in 2017, and it's basically just things that this author feels bad about in like funny, quirky little illustrations, and some of them are silly, some of them are more like deep little illustrations accompanied by what she feels bad about, and it was just really relatable, pretty funny. I enjoyed it. I was like sending pictures of it to my partner, and he was like, can I read that after? Okay, back to audiobooks again, and my legs are going numb. This was another DNF, unfortunately, and it was also a book that I had through NetGalley, and that is The Forevers by Chris Whitaker, and it was read by Fran Burgoyne. I DNF'd this at 45%, which was chapter 21. It's a YA thriller published by Hotkey Books in 2021, and it's kind of like a end of the world type book. We're following the final month, I believe, of these teenagers' lives as they wait for this comet to descend and eradicate life as we know it, and humanity and the world basically. And there's a string of suicides, murders potentially, as this is happening, and no one's caring. Everybody's like, it's the end of the world, why should we care? They're still trying to be normal, they're still trying to go to school, and even the teachers are now just like, do what you want, you know. So yeah, that is the sort of premise for it. Honestly, I just found everyone to be super whiny and unlikable, and I just zoned out. So when I was getting to that stage, I was like, okay, this is not for me, unfortunately. It started off interesting, like I thought I was really going to enjoy it, and it just fizzled into a direction that I wasn't interested in. So that is that. Oh, and there was too many characters for me to keep track of. It wasn't introduced in an easily traceable way, I would say, for listening anyway. I don't know if it would have been different on the page, but I struggled in terms of listening with that. Next up, yet again, another NetGalley book that I listened to through audio, and that was Index, A History of the by Dennis Duncan, and this one I gave a 3 out of 5 stars. It's non-fiction adult, published by Alan Lane in 2021, and it's basically the history of the index that you see in, is it the front or the back? You see in your books, how that came to be, why it was used, examples of, instances of, the benefits of, all that sort of thing, different kind of versions and interpretations of the index. It's basically a book about words, which isn't all books about words, but yeah, it's very, very particular. Yeah, it was strangely interesting. Like, it was so relaxing to listen to as well. It felt like even if I didn't necessarily care a lot of what I was listening to, it gave me like a David Attenborough kind of relaxation vibe. I think it was kind of like ASMR to me, because it was just dull. Do you know what I mean? Like, just dull, but interesting also, and just I don't know, I like listening to it. Very well researched, that's for sure. And it explored more than just a very niche topic, which was also helpful because, you know, kept me on my toes. But it was dry. I did zone out a lot, but it was good listening generally. So that's a 3 stars. Next up, I read a book that my co-worker loaned me. I've already given it back to him. And that is the first book in the Tower of Babel series. And that was Senlin Ascends by Josiah Bancroft, which is like kind of high fantasy, steampunk, adult, published by Orbit in 2013. And I gave this one a 3 out of 5 stars. And I will say, I thought it was going to be more of a higher rated book for me. 3 is still a decent rating, it's still good. I'm interested in continuing on, at least checking out the sequel. But I thought it was going to be like a 4, 4.5, and so I feel a little bit of disappointment that it wasn't quite that. Yeah, so we're basically following a newly wedded couple who decide to travel for their honeymoon to the Tower of Babel, which is this biblical legend that some of you may be aware of, where it was also known as the Tower of Babylon, where in the biblical story all these I can't remember the area, Babylon, the Babylonians was building up this structure, this massive tower. They were working together, and I think it was a way to hide from God or do things in there. I think there was a lot of corruption and nastiness happening, correct me if I'm wrong, and God saw this.
Hi, so just want to quickly chime in to correct myself. So basically, Noah built this structure or sorted out this structure because it was to stop the inhabitants of scattering. But this went against God's 10 commandments, because then they were actively going against filling the earth, like with all these different people, and they were just staying in one point. And that's when God was like,
and he was like, no, I'm gonna make so that they can't talk to each other, they won't understand. And this is how the origin in the biblical story, in the legend, of different languages came about. So he scrambled their words so they wouldn't understand, and they'd stopped building and stopped doing whatever they were doing in the tower that God couldn't see. And like they made them babble, you know, so like Babylon, Tower of Babel, kind of sounds like the English word of babble, nonsense talk, you know, gobbledygook, that sort of thing. Anyway, it's taken that, it's inspired from that, but in this kind of world, I think it's somewhat kind of, I don't know, it felt like it was sort of factual, historically set in, but also not. I don't know, but it takes that, and it reimagines what the Tower of Babel could have been, like all the different floors, what they catered to you, what they gave to you. Yeah, but it's basically not as our main character, Senlin, surname, expects. And he loses his wife. Like the first thing he does when he gets there is he loses her, and his mission basically is to try to find her and make it through these undocumented amount of numbers of the towers to try and find her. And that's basically the premise of the whole story, or at least the whole story for the first book. It's quite a unique and novel concept, so I've got to give it credit where that's due, because that was interesting for sure. I realise I never continued writing my review for this one. How strange. I will say it had me intrigued, because I was like, this is just so bizarre, so strange. I need to know how everything works. But I also feel like, in contrast to that, it was almost too strange that it was over complex, and I think it was overly descriptive in what it was trying to say. Like, for example, there were scenes where they were describing structures that was in the tower, and I couldn't for the life of me picture what was being described, because it was almost too much that it turned into nothing in my head. Do you know what I mean? Like, I was like, oh, okay, I get it, and then I'm like, oh no, I don't get it now. Oh no, you're changing that, so is that not there? It was just a bit much. So I think it could have, you know, benefited from more editing maybe, and just less floof in the vocabulary perhaps, and it might have got a higher rating. But yeah, I'm still intrigued in trying out the sequel. Next up, I listened to another NetGalley audiobook, and that was How to Kill Your Family by Bella Mackie, which I gave a 4.5 stars. It was read by Elle Porter and Will Kirk, and it's an adult fiction thriller kind of vibe, published by HarperCollins in 2021, and we're following Grace, I think is her name, who's in prison, but she's in prison for a crime she didn't commit. However, she wants to tell us her life story of all the crimes that she did commit, murdering her estranged family members. But she's not been caught for that. So we basically recount how she got there, what happened to get her in this situation, why she felt like she wanted to murder these people, and the falsely accused murder that she's been caught for, and how that situation went down. This was super entertaining. It balances the macabre with the humour absolutely beautifully. Like, it's so seamless. At times I was reading something like devastated on like what I was reading, and I just couldn't help but burst out a trumpet of laughter, you know. It was just like in the same breath. It was crazy. Yeah, and it was a fascinating study of Grace's mind. What a strange being. After that, I listened to the audiobook for Stolen, and this is by Tess Stimson, and it was read by a load of people: Indra Ove, Colin Mace, Aisha Carla, Beth Eyre, Josie Doon, and Stephanie Racine. And I gave this a 4.5 stars. I really enjoyed this one. It's an adult thriller published by Avon in 2021, and we're following this woman. I can't remember her name. I want to say her name is Grace as well, but I might be wrong. Anyway, we're following her as she goes abroad with her 3-year-old daughter to her best friend's wedding. And at this wedding, she turns away, not for a long period of time in her mind, and kind of unravels that maybe it was for a long period of time as things start to, you know, map out. But she turns herself away. She has other people at the wedding kind of keeping tabs on the child, but the child goes missing, and it's this big thing. Obviously, all the wedding kind of, it's like the aftermath, so they've already married, I believe, but it stops the celebrations, understandably. Everybody is searching for this child. They're thinking she's been abducted. They're saying there's no way she would have gone to the sea because she's terrified of water. And yeah, so it's a big kind of hunt to try and find this kid. This had excellent voice actors. As you see, there's quite a bit of a list of people that was involved in the voice acting, and I felt like that really paid off because everybody had their own style, their own flair. It definitely made characters more distinct, and I think it just really worked. It was super addictive, and the ending was super shocking. I was not expecting that at all. Some of the tropes for me didn't feel right. I don't know, they just left a strange taste in my mouth, but other than that, I bloody loved this. It was so good. Oh my god, there's some books that I keep missing off. This is why I don't read that many usually in a month. So I also finished The House by Paco Rosca, and this is a story about 3 siblings who go to their parents' house after their dad has passed away, and they're fixing it up to sell it, and they kind of have these memories of their time in childhood. They're kind of a little bit estranged, to be fair, and they have some lingering resentment for each other and for different reasons, but as they fix this house up, they remember the fond times, the good times, and get quite emotional over it. And I thought this was absolutely beautiful. It is illustrated in these gorgeous tones, gorgeous illustrations, kind of like cinematically panelled, if you know what I mean. And it was beautiful. It really touched my heart. I think I gave this 4 stars if I remember correctly. But yeah, very touching, very relatable for a lot of people, I would say. And yeah, I'd very much recommend this. These 2 books actually were gifts from my friend's son. So maybe I did read 22 books. I thought I did. I'm very confused. I don't know. Anyway, next up I read Luster, which was the Book of Sins book club pick for March, and this was by Raven Lelaney, and I also had this on NetGalley, but I have a physical copy too, and I gave this one a 5 stars. I loved it. It is adult fiction, kind of literary fiction, published by Picador in 2020, and I'll read you the synopsis for this one because it is very strange. Eddie is just trying to survive. She's messing up in her dead-end job, and a relationship with Eric, a white middle-aged archivist, is in an open marriage. It's not uncomplicated. When she visits the suburban home Eric shares with his wife, Eddie doesn't think she will be asked to stay, or asked to provide advice to their adopted black daughter. Least of all does Eddie expect that there she will be given space to do the thing that means the most to her, to paint, to document on canvas her life, finally. This was super strange, incredibly alluring, interesting exploration of race, kink, the kink industry, kink culture, I don't know, and loneliness as well, and how they all interconnect in some degree in this particular instance, and it was very subtle in its execution, but nevertheless climatic in its execution. After that, I finished up Pam Smythe's The Hideaway, which I gave a 4 out of 5 stars. This is middle grade fiction with kind of like a little bit of magic, published by Pavilion in 2021. This one says, one rain-lashed autumn night, Billy can't stand the fighting any longer. He packs a bag and slips ghost-like into the dark. His hiding place is a cold and gloomy graveyard, and soon something mysterious and magical starts to happen. This one tackled some really difficult themes really well. I will say there's trigger warning for domestic abuse, but the illustrations were absolutely beautiful. It was incredibly moving. It took me a little while longer than I meant to take reading this, but yeah, I enjoyed my time here. This was a beautiful, beautiful story. Okay, second to last book I read, Norse Mythology by Neil Gaiman, which I gave a 3 out of 5 stars. This is non-fiction, myth retelling, aimed at adults, I would say, published by Bloomsbury in 2017. This is very beginner friendly, and that's all really. Like it gives you the basic stories. It gives you the information on who's who in Asgard, in Norse mythology, gods wise, giant wise, like you know who everyone is, and it lays it out incredibly well, but it is very basic. And I think had I not known what I know already about Norse mythology, I would have rated this higher, but because this ain't my first rodeo, I guess you could say, it just fell a bit flat. It also wasn't very engaging in the way that I would have expected from Neil Gaiman. He's one of my favourite authors, and I've always like commended him on his storytelling, but this just didn't feel very him. I don't even know how to explain that. And there was some really weird sentence structure in here as well. It just didn't work. It was as if, like, for example, Financial Times says, Gaiman assumes the role of fireside bard, inviting us to sit close on a chilly winter's night and chuckle and wonder along with him. I feel like in his attempt to kind of fit that theme, it got a bit too overly flowery, overly complex in the structure of the beginning sentence. It kind of lost its way. I don't know if you guys know what I mean, but yeah. This was actually the last book I read, but of course I've accidentally switched the way I read things. I can't believe I've missed things out. This has been more chaotic than I was expecting. Anyway, the last book, although it was technically the second to last book I read, was The Liar of Red Valley by Walter Goodwater, and this was read by Munir Grace. So I listened to the audiobook for this one. It was a NetGalley arc I also had, and unfortunately I gave this one a 2 out of 5 stars. This one's supernatural fantasy, kind of adult, published by Rebellion Publishing in 2021, and the premise just sounded so interesting and it just didn't work for me. So in this world, Red Valley, there's this thing called the Liar, and it's kind of a supernatural person in what they're able to do. There's monsters, there's this king that nobody really knows what this king is, but they know that he protects the land, and yeah, it's kind of like urban fantasy. But yeah, concept super interesting, but there was just too many threads of plot to kind of keep track of. I lacked connection again because I guess I was frustrated by not being able to keep focused on what was happening, and there was some really irritating voice acting. I just really didn't enjoy that. And yeah, sorry to end this video on a low, but that is my wrap up for the month of March. Let me know what you guys read. Again, I'm really super happy with the amount of books that I've got off my TBR, but the quality was kind of here and there, a bit all over the place. Definitely the month of audiobooks, the month of mystery thrillers, and the month of 3-star reads. So yeah, as I say, let me know what you guys read in March, and I will speak to you in another video soon. Bye!